evening. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. And as people come in, oh, Tara, sorry to hear that you're sick. We are going to give you a good bit of time to work together tonight. So hopefully you can power through that little bit of work time together. So we're going to start with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that ONlit-org's work takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work on this land, and we are thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people for their care for and teachings about the earth. This acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities to our relationships and to the ancestral lands on which we learn, work, and live. So welcome to our final session together. It's been a bit of a long haul with 8 sessions. We started this all the way back in August. And as a reminder, these sessions have been recorded. They are all up on YouTube, and MJ has put a lovely picture of me in the middle of being passionate and talking about something on every screen. So you can check those out. If you missed any of the sessions, they are all up there and available. And the slides are all available so that you can use them if you do choose to run your own book study. Our plan for tonight, I'm going to chat with you for about 20 minutes. Then we're going to send you off to an interactive task. We're actually going to give you the next steps to do some lesson planning. And then we're going to come back together for our wrap up for our prize and to bring it all together. And tonight's prize is your choice. So there are a number of books up here. The Teacher's Guide to Effective Sentence Writing. We've had explicit instruction up there, but it is up there again. Another one, Bringing Words to Life, Art and Science of Primary Teaching, of Teaching Primary Reading, the Comprehension, Knowledge to Practice, another great one, the ABCs of CBM. I don't know that we had that one. Maybe we did. And Seven Mighty Moves. So you can choose between those books. So whoever does win, you'll send your info to MJ at the end and which book you would like to win. So good luck to everyone. So off we go on to chapter 8, Weaving Elements Together for a Lifetime of Reading. And we're going to prepare for our breakout rooms by renaming yourself. So you're going to add either a K, a P, a J, or an I to your name. And if you go to the 3 little dots on the corner, you can add that to your name. And then when it comes to breakout room time, we're going to make MJ work and try to put you into groups based on working together. So that way you are going to get something really quite useful out of this. Oh, look at that. MJ put in the chat the lovely picture of me right there. All right. So I don't know if you've heard about paragraph shrinking, but paragraph shrinking really is a great strategy that we can use to work with students to summarize. And it's a great way to help build that comprehension and oral language as students have to really work to summarize what they've been read. And we ask them to do it in about 10 words. So it's a really great add-on to a partner reading routine if you're doing that. And so to show you what that can look like, we have shrunk each of the chapters from our book. So this is launching our final session. And if you think all the way back to our introduction, we shrunk that chapter down to Teaching Reading Requires Deep Knowledge and Continued Learning. Chapter 2, we talked about structured literacy instruction is an MTS, and in an MTSS is constantly informed by data. In chapter 3, we moved into phoneme awareness. Teach students to identify, blend, and segment individual sounds to support reading and spelling. Chapter 4, we moved into phonics. So to decode words, students need explicit, systematic instruction in how sound connects to print. We moved into fluency in chapter 5, and we said fluency is multifaceted, accuracy first, then rate, which is a proxy for comprehension. Then we talked about comprehension, focus on the end goal by centering the text rather than the strategy for instruction. And 2 weeks ago from Sudbury, we talked about vocabulary, teach high utility words explicitly, but also equip students to learn words independently. And we will see at the end of our session tonight how we shrink down this final chapter. So getting into just a few takeaways tonight. And our first one from this chapter is that the components of literacy may be taught in isolation with early readers and with older struggling readers, but it's important to understand that these skills are reciprocal and interrelated. And the idea of reciprocal and interrelated are going to frame our work a little bit as we work through this chapter tonight. We know that research has identified the component skills that are critical in the development of fluent readers who comprehend text. Throughout this book, the authors share information about different assessments and interventions that help us to isolate and teach each of the component skills. This concept of separate yet interconnected skills, which are dependent on each other, is what really informs the practice of next steps. And we can see this graphic, it's right from the book, and it's this analogy of weaving the various elements together to produce a completed handiwork, like deep learning. This visual is here to help us understand what is meant by the interconnectedness of these subskills. So you can see the layers of the word SIP that are used here as an example. And we can see how we can weave that instruction. So the instruction of the phonemes, IP, as well as its meaning, depending on context. And of course, this woven masterpiece can sit atop oral language. The authors also give us a series of questions that we might ask ourselves to keep this idea of integration at the front of our minds. So, did I weave the skill components today? And this helps us to think explicitly about more than one component at a time, and that the value of integrating that into the overall big picture, maybe even over the course of the day. For example, did I teach phoneme blending skills orally without connecting to print or meaning? Or did I make those connections where possible? Did I do explicit vocabulary routine without having students also read or decode and say that phonology piece, the word? The second question, did I teach the indicated skills that were identified via the assessment? So our screeners, for example, Acadians, provide an efficient picture of how well those sub-skills are developing so that we can identify which students might be at risk and in what areas. We can then follow up with skills based on diagnostic assessments, such as we've seen in QPS, the core phonics, whatever's out there, to pinpoint the exact skill gaps and to inform our instruction. The final question is, did I then combine the skills to strengthen my students' learning? So based on that assessment data, we need to bring together the skills that need attention for each of our students in need. We can then deepen their understanding and then combine that specific skill with others. So let's take a closer look at this idea of those interrelated skills. And this is an example of how different layers of language are integrated. And it's from a chapter written by Suzanne Carricker in Multisensory Teaching of Basic Language Skills. And we're looking at the word jumped. And so to spell this word, students need to use phonemic awareness to split the word up into its sounds. J, a, m, t. They need to use syntax to understand that jump can be used as a verb and that verbs have tenses. They need awareness of morphology to understand that jumped has two meaningful units, the free base jump and the suffix t, the ed. They need to use semantics to understand that the T in jumped represents the past tense. And they need to, or not the T, the T, and they need to use orthography to write the graphemes and to specifically understand that T is spelt with that ED and not with a T. So coming back once again to our structured literacy graphic, and it really fits beautifully here with this understanding that although these skill areas are separate, they're also all dependent on one another. And we can see that reflected in the pink section at the top, that integrated, woven, and simultaneous. So let's move into our second key takeaway. And it's included so that we don't forget, and this is the quote, "The reading brain is a language brain first. Creating language-rich environments, regardless of the reading focus, builds the strongest foundation for reading to develop." No matter what our specific learning target or goal in terms of component skills, we always need to remember that this all happens against that backdrop of a language-rich environment. And here are some of the ways that we can promote, we can ensure that we're providing that language-rich environment for learning to be optimized. Things we can do. We can model the use of academic language. We can engage students in the discussion. We can deliver rich read-aloud lessons, and we can establish expectations and routines for meaningful talk. And really, this is all about talk, authentic, meaningful, accountable talk that builds language. Um, it's kind of coming back to that quote, that now famous quote from James Britton, reading and writing float on a sea of talk, which can be broadened again to that idea that learning floats on a sea of talk. Which is then going to bring us to our third key takeaway, and it's really one of the most powerful statements that we can hear. Assessment drives instruction. So if we think of the analogy of riding a bike, where assessment is the cyclist and the instruction is the bike, without the cyclist, without the assessment, the bike, the instruction does not move, or certainly does not move effectively. The purpose of the cyclist is literally to move the bike, to make it go. And if we don't use the cyclist to do that task, we are not moving the bike forward effectively or efficiently. We're not making proper use of the cyclist in the same way that we're not making use of that assessment data. Our early level CBM, curriculum-based measures, are used to assess isolated component skills and oral reading fluency, which leads teachers to sometimes mistakenly focus their instruction solely on that assessed skill. So that's that silo effect. For example, if a student is weak in nonsense word reading, we might mistakenly start teaching only grapheme phoneme correspondences and decoding, blending sounds together to decode words in isolation. But we can't forget, we also need to be doing the attaching of meaning to those words. We need to have that vocabulary piece. We need to be putting words together in sentences to offer that exposure to written syntax. And then we need to pull those sentences together and connect it. We don't want to teach decoding words in a silo. We want to integrate the use of those same words. We want to have our students put them in sentences orally and then in writing. So weaving that thread of sound by sound reading or learning to decode through that tapestry, that handiwork of the other essential components. We have to respond to data and plan instruction that accounts for the interrelatedness of those individual skills and knowledge of how these work together. Which brings us to full circle. So we did see this graphic, and hopefully you recall this. We talked about this in our very first session together, and it outlines the steps or the elements of the outcome-driven model. And that's those 5 steps to guide our problem-solving effort as teachers. And it's an easy to implement, assessment-driven approach to inform evidence-based reading instruction. So just as a quick review, we start at the top, identify the students at risk. That's our who, and that's our universal screening data. That in Ontario, we have Acadience Reading K-6, we have Easy CBM, and we have Ames Web. In French, we have Acadience Reading Français. So that's going to give us our red flag, our students who are at risk. Who do we need to be maybe taking a little bit of a closer look at? From there, we need to validate that. We need to determine individual needs. We need to dig deeper. So here we're going to use that diagnostic assessment, definitely for our students flagged at risk, unless it's really obvious from the screener, but also for any students. Sometimes we have students who've hit those benchmark levels that are still a little curious. So anyone that we've got some questions about that we want to know a little bit more about, we're going to move into that diagnostic assessment. Once we've got that data, we've got our what we need to teach. From there, we're going to be able to plan and implement instruction to meet those needs. What are we going to do about it? As we go through that, as we plan, as we implement then that instruction, we need to evaluate the plan. Is it working? We need to be doing our progress monitoring. Are we going to carry on? Or what needs to change? And when we look through data, the recommendation in the book really is to look at those data points. And when we see 3 points below our target line, that's when we need to change something. And the recommendation is that we're only going to change one thing at a time. So we have and we're doing that progress monitoring weekly. We see 3 points below that target line. We need to change something. Maybe we need to change what it is we're teaching. Maybe we need to change something about how we're teaching. Maybe we need to be looking at the size of our group of students. Maybe it's rather than a longer group session, we need to be looking at 2 shorter group sessions. Maybe we need to be looking at how many students are in our group. Maybe it is the actual tool that we're using to teach, but something needs to change one thing at a time. And that's where we decide whether we're going to make those changes. If our students are on that line, that target line, we continue with the plan. All right, it's your turn. We're going to send you off into some breakout rooms. Just a reminder of our wonderful breakout room norms, especially tonight because it's a nice long one. We're going to give you lots of time. We're going to give you about 20 minutes together. So contribute to the conversation, speak up, take up space, be cognizant of different experiences, engage critically with the content, and know that growing and learning means that you may shift your position, you may revisit your assumptions, and you may advance your thinking. So what we are going to do, we know that assessment drives instruction, so we're going to be giving you some data, and we're going to have you plan instruction that responds to the indicated needs. You're going to use that STEPS framework. We've seen it in every one of our sessions. We haven't really had a chance to interact with it, so that's what we're going to do tonight. You're going to plan a small group lesson based on students below benchmark in a certain skill area, and you'll see that that's been predetermined for you. If you had not yet put a K for kindergarten, a P for primary, a J for junior, or an I for intermediate besides your name, can you please do that so that MJ knows where to send you so that we make sure that this is something that is relevant for you at the end? We are going to include the decision tree graphic for your reference, as well as the STEPS model, and that is going to be right in the link that we put out. So, excuse me, you'll have the slide that you're going to be working on to do your planning, but you will also be able to scroll up to see this slide here, and I will project the slide with all of the student information. So please make sure you've had a chance to rename yourself. There's a few people I'm seeing that have not had a chance yet. So P for primary, J for junior, I for intermediate, K for kindergarten, so that MJ knows where to send you. As you're working through this, keep in mind that notion of weaving. So where we're at tonight, we want you to keep in mind how you might integrate some of the other skills. So you're going to open up that link to the Google Doc presentation that is in the chat right now. And MJ is going to send you off into breakout rooms, and I'm going to project this screen for you, and you're going to choose a student. So we've got a few different options for you. We've got a beginning of grade 1 student who's got some below benchmark data on phoneme segmentation fluency. So we're going to focus our small group lesson learning on phonemic awareness skills. We've got a beginning of grade 2 student where we're going to work with automaticity with grapheme phoneme correspondences, decoding phonics. There's a middle of grade 4 student who work on fluency on rate, and a beginning of grade 6 student. So we're going to send you off for about 20 minutes to work together, and then we will come back to do our final wrap up of our book study. Have a great discussion. Open the link before you go, please. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you had a chance to chat. I know it's not enough time to actually plan everything out completely, but hopefully you got to work through at least a little bit of a lesson and get through some ideas together. So just to wrap it up, we're going to add our paragraph shrink to the paragraph shrinking for this chapter, for the last chapter. And here we have plan integrated component instruction based on data from the CBMs to strengthen learning. And that's curriculum-based measures like we are using. So it seems only appropriate to wrap up with these words from Dr. Deb Glaser herself, and this is a link to a podcast that we will put out for you. Whenever we say, let's take our next steps, that means there's movement and progress forward. So what will be your personal next step? And we are going to challenge you to give us a little bit of feedback. What is it that you are going to do? We are all at different places in our knowledge and our understanding and our application of this learning. So please take a moment. There is a link to a Menti. There is also a QR code that you can use. And, make a commitment or an idea as to one thing that you're going to do. Maybe you're going to commit to reading a research article once a week, or working more carefully to implement targeted instruction in small groups, or maybe bringing this into your whole group instruction. Just think a little bit about what your next step will be. How are you going to continue moving forward in this very important work that we're doing? So please take a moment. It's great for us to see some of that feedback as well. It kind of helps us to gear some ideas as to what we might provide for professional learning if we know that you're interested in something in particular. And as you do that, I am going to say a great big thank you to all of you. It's been 8 chapters. 8 weeks of discussion. It's a long haul. We started this all the way back at the beginning of August, and we're doing some daytime sessions, some evening sessions. They are all available. So if you did miss anything, again, they are all available on the ONlit YouTube channel. So you can take a look at those anytime, go back to them anytime. The slide decks are available at onlit.org. So if you do want to organize your own book study, I know I did one separately with my school board. It was fantastic. So that's all available to give you a little bit of guidance as well. And just thank you for being with me week after week. We do have a winner for this evening, and it's the choice of prizes. So MJ, who is our winner? And that's it. I'm going to sign off for the night. I'll stick around for a little bit. We'll turn off the recording if you do have any questions. But otherwise, again, a great big thank you for the last several weeks. And I look forward to doing more PD with you going forward. Have a great evening, everyone.